warm welcome to the Friday edition of the Our City COVID-19 show, giving you the latest updates from home and abroad. I am Michaela Miller. Today marks episode 50 of the COVID-19 news show on Cape Town TV. We encourage you to keep watching as we bring you the latest updates on news and the COVID-19 pandemic. Gender-based violence have reached undeniably alarming levels in South Africa, impacting on almost every aspect of life. The murders of 2 women this week have enraged the nation and prompted calls for the government to be stern on gender-based violence and for the president to take into action on his vow that enough is enough. It's nothing short of a national emergency that femicide and rape rates are increasing countrywide, and the government must act decisively to tackle these issues. These are your headlines for today. Gender-based violence highlighted again after the brutal killings of Naledi Pangindawo and Tsegofatso Pule. We'll be looking at another case in the Western Cape. Western Cape Sintako waiting for news on relief funds, while the Department of Transport is tabling the grievances of taxi associations with the National Coronavirus Command Council, and the conduct declares the Electoral Act unconstitutional. We speak to Professor Pierre de Vos, who will explain what this means, as well as to the political leaders who get the reactions on the ruling. Today is day 78 of the national lockdown. It also marks a major milestone in the fight against COVID-19. The current number of COVID-19 cases nationally stands at 58,568, with 33,252 recoveries and 1,284 deaths. In the Western Cape, there are 37,422 confirmed cases, with 22,862 recoveries and 960 deaths. A milestone: over 1 million people have been tested across the country, of which 29,999 were conducted since the last report on Wednesday. Yesterday, the Western Cape government held a virtual press conference in which the head of Provincial Health Department, Dr. Keith Kluter, gave an update on the province's testing backlog.
I can confirm that as of yesterday morning, the backlog of tests in the NHLS laboratories was 3,727. That is a big drop from about 2 weeks ago of 27,000 tests. Now that backdrop, that backlog working away has been on the back of quite a few things that NHLS has done. It's like some process re-engineering, looking at their systems, and bringing additional capacity into the system. So we are very heartened by the fact that the backlog has been worked away to that extent. There's an undertaking from our colleagues there to work and do whatever they can in their power, that by tomorrow, to work away the backlog completely. So the impact that has had on the waiting time, I can use 2 examples. The waiting time for people in hospital working for tests. About 10, 14 days ago, it would have been up to 5 days. The waiting time for somebody being in hospital this week, over the last 2 or 3 days, is people get the results back the same day or the following day. So that's been a huge difference, and within a hospital, it makes a big difference that somebody can get the test back within the same day, knowing that they're COVID positive or not. What the implications of that is, we're cautiously optimistic that we can have an engagement, and we are talking to our colleagues to really figure out what is the lab capacity for the next week or 2, to see whether we can start increasing our testing, let's call it our testing regimen, to start including additional tests into this. And it would be quite important for us to ascertain that we can have the capacity to now start taking an uptake in more testing within the system. Thank you very much.
Gender-based violence has once again come to the fore after the death of Naledi Pangindawo, the 25-year-old mother of three who was allegedly killed by a man with whom she had a relationship. The murder sparked the hashtag Justice for Naledi and was soon followed by the hashtag Justice for Tseho. Tseho Fatsopule was 8 months pregnant when she was killed and hanged from a tree. In a separate incident, the case against the boyfriend of Sibongiseni Kabada has been dropped due to the inconclusive evidence. This was despite the fact that he confessed he had discovered her body before putting it into a bag and placing it behind his shack. Neighbors found it 2 weeks later. Our city reporter Stephanie Pitt has more.
As the country mourns the death of Naledi Pangindawo, today we are reminded of all those who died at the hands of gender-based violence. Today, sadly, we are reminded of the brutal murder of 34-year-old Sibongiseni Gabadwa, whose body was found stuffed in a bag behind a shack. It has come to light that the deceased's alleged murderer, her boyfriend that was linked to being involved in her death, has been set free due to inconclusive evidence. We speak to an organization, Elita Labantu, who advocates for the rights of women and children.
Firstly, let me start by saying that, violence against women has always been at an all-time high. It's an issue that has always been a pressing issue in our society. And, unfortunately, it only takes incidences like the incidents that happened to Naledi and Zeho in the Gauteng province for it to resurface again within the media space and for people to pay attention to
Sia
it.
says the reasons for the alleged perpetrator's case being thrown out was due to the fact that the court could not tie him to the murder. As an organization, they want the courts to reopen his case.
With every process in the court system, they have very complex ways of actually investigating cases. And the issue with this Bomiseni case is that the last time the family had seen her was on the 15th of May. And what had happened is that there's so many links that actually tie up the alleged accused or the accused himself to the death of Sibongiseni, because what he said in his statement is that he went outside to smoke, came back inside, he saw that she was deceased, and after he had seen that, he proceeded to actually put her in a refuge bag, and then he put her body behind his shack and basically wanted to dispose of the body, because what he did is that he covered the body with planks so that nobody can see it. So now within this entire process, although the court can't link him to a murder charge, there are other aspects or legal avenues that the court system can actually find him guilty of, and disposing of the body or wanting to dispose of the body and concealing the body is actually a crime in itself. So, they within those legal avenues, we want the court system to actually find this alleged perpetrator guilty.
The organization is providing counseling services to the family and is asking the NPA to reinstate the case. There is an online petition that can be signed to ensure justice for Sibongiseni is served.
As an organization, that cares, we are actually providing support to the family so that a death in a family is very traumatic, and we are offering our counseling service, our free counseling services to the family. And from a legal perspective, we are actually writing to the NPA so that they can reinstate the case, as well as we have an online petition that anyone who can go to our Facebook and actually sign up the petition. I think we started the petition about 10 hours ago, and it's already sitting at close to 1,000 signatures right now. We're using all our every technique that we can utilize in terms of raising awareness about this particular case. Because we've also wrote to the media itself, and you'll see it, it's already out on Cape Times. So every legal avenue we will try to utilize, and every avenue of awareness we'll try to utilize so that we can bring this case back to court so that we can receive justice for Smogi Sen.
As a country, we continue to mourn the deaths of those slain at the hands of gender based violence. But we ask ourselves, as a country, how can we combat this inhumane acts against our women? For Our City News, I am Stephanie Pete.
The brutal killings of Naledi Pangindawo and Tsehofatso Pule have reminded the nation that efforts to end gender-based violence and femicide appear futile as cases rise. We spoke to Esther Maluleke, Chief Director of Governance, Transformation, Justice and Security in the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. She is also a member of the Interim Steering Committee on Gender-Based Violence and is supporting the formation of the National Council on GBV.
Thanks for the opportunity to actually talk to us as a department, but a department that is really representing government on this issue. As we've done in the past and continue to do, we condemn the abuse of women and the killing of women and children. And we remain committed to intensifying and accelerating efforts to achieve the elimination of gender-based violence. This obviously concerns us. It concerns us because we have done a lot of work in the past and we continue to do so. For an example, communicating, urging our partners like yourselves, the media, the president taking every opportunity in whatever platform he has, including parliament, to really send strong messages around gender-based violence and to urge all of us, government and civil society, the private sector, everybody, to come to the party so that we can together fight this scourge. We know as government that this requires a multi-sectoral approach, and this is what the National Strategic Plan emphasizes, a multi-sectoral approach where we coordinate all the efforts all of us are doing to actually eradicate gender-based violence.
A National Council for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is being established to fight against gender-based violence to the country.
Clearly, it shows that these interventions that we are having, both as government and civil society, are really not giving us the kind of results that we're looking for. So we remain committed. We are working hard to try and implement the programs that we have. You will recall that we had a summit in 2018 that made specific recommendations in terms of how we should collectively deal with gender-based violence. And two of those recommendations were first, the establishment of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence, which will then be tasked with developing the National Strategic Plan. But you also know that there was a recommendation to have an interim steering committee, which should sit for 6 months after the summit to actually put together a National Council on Gender-Based Violence. But on reflection, when the interim steering committee was established, they realized that it was going to be very difficult to establish a structure which is based on nothing. In other words, a structure that doesn't support any plan. So we had to take a step back and develop the National Strategic Plan as the interim steering committee. And that's where we are. you know that the president released the strategic plan to the public on the 30th of April. And now the huge task following that is to ensure that we have this council in place as soon as possible. But we condemn in strongest terms the continued killing of women and children and abuse. That can be, we need really to rally together as a country and deal with this problem. The National Strategic Plan lays out in one of the chapters, talks about the accountability and coordination mechanisms. And that is where the issue around the council is located. So the council, in terms of recommendations made by the Presidential Summit in 2018 and now the declaration, we were given broad guidelines, and one of them is to have a council which has 51% representation from civil society and 49% representation from government. So as I said, this council will reflect a collaborative effort between government and civil society and the private sector to actually work together to fight the scourge. So it is not going to be only a council represented by government, but there'll actually be a large representation of members coming from civil society.
There were clashes in Hamburg, Hout Bay on Thursday between residents and law enforcement officers of the structures were demolished by the city's anti-land invasion unit. The city of Cape Town said the structures were unoccupied, but community activist Lee Smith disagreed.
Despite heavy rainfalls and cold fronts in the Western Cape, residents of Hamburg and Hout Bay have been left in limbo after their structures were demolished by law enforcement officers. Community activist Lee Smith says that the structures that were demolished yesterday were occupied by residents and that they have taken the city of Cape Town to the High Court.
That we are at present in the High Court with the city of Cape Town regarding evictions. We've been there since last year in the Cape High Court. There's a gentleman's agreement, and no, it's not in the court document, but we had an agreement that, we wouldn't protest and they would not evict until the court proceedings had stopped. So what happened yesterday took us totally by surprise. Now, the city claims that the structures was unoccupied. One of them, yes, it was unoccupied, and the other one wasn't occupied. But the people's beds are still laying there, But they go into the media and they make all of these sorts of claims that structures are unoccupied and things like that, when they clearly know exactly what they're doing. And they've been doing this to the residents of Hamburg for more than a decade, because in 2010 they did the same thing, where they demolished 30 structures and they were all occupied. And they still went in the media and said it was unoccupied, and it was well documented live. You understand? So they've been doing this and they've been getting away with it. And the people of Hamburg are powerless to stop them, because the problem here is that we go to court and they ignore the courts, they ignore everything, they ignore, basically, for the most part, we are powerless to stop them. And that is where we are.
The community of Hamburg says that they were in agreement with the city of Cape Town that they will not protest until court proceedings have been cleared. They say that what happened yesterday took them by surprise. For our City News, I'm Zaneda Mvana, Hamburg, Hout Bay.
After being flooded during a recent storm, residents of the waterfront informal settlement in Philippi East attempted to occupy nearby land on Wednesday. Around 130 families live in waterfront, which lacks adequate sanitation and has no electricity. Established on city-owned land in May 2019, this is the first deep winter experience for its residents. An area covering about 10 shacks is now completely flooded. We will continue giving you the latest news from the city, province and around the world. When we return, we will hear the outcome of the meeting between the Transport Minister and taxi associations and the review of Electoral Act. What does this mean for citizens? Stay with us. We do apologize for the sound on that previous insert. The brutal killings of Naledi Pangindawu and Tseho Fatsophule have reminded the nation that efforts to end gender-based violence and the femicide appear futile as case rises. A National Council for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is being established to fight against gender-based violence in the country. There were clashes in Hamburg, Houtbay on Thursday between residents and law enforcement officers after structures were demolished by the city's anti-land invasion unit. The city of Cape Town said the structures were unoccupied, but community activist Lee Smith disagreed. After being flooded during a recent storm, residents of the waterfront informal settlements in Philippi East attempted to occupy nearby land on Wednesday. Around 130 families live in waterfront, which lacks adequate sanitation and has no electricity. Established on city-owned land in May 2019, this is the first deep winter experience for its residents. An area covering about 10 shacks is now completely flooded. We will continue and give you the latest news from the city, province and around the world. We will take in a short break now. We'll be back shortly.
And continue to do, we condemn the abuse of women and the killing of women and children. And we remain committed to intensifying and accelerating efforts to achieve the elimination of gender-based violence. This obviously concerns us. It concerns us because we have done a lot of work in the past, and we continue to do so. For an example, communicating, urging our partners like yourselves, the media, the president taking every opportunity in whatever platform he has, including Parliament, to really send strong messages around gender-based violence and to urge all of us, government and civil society, the private sector, everybody, to come to the party so that we can together fight this scourge. We know as government that this
rules that the Electoral Act of 1998 was unconstitutional. What does this mean? Engages with the electorate.
Completely. Because now
of work to do. Clearly, it shows
counseling services to the family and is
Well, it means that before.
Despite heavy rain.
You know that those that our national office met with
Yesterday, Minister
Minister Mbalula says
Welcome back. You're still tuned into Channel 263 on DSTV and the Friday edition of the Our City COVID-19 show on Cape Town TV. We do apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties and our engineers are working on it. Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula has met with various taxi bodies in an effort to address issues pertaining to taxi increases, relief funds, long-distance travelling, as well as loading capacity. The minister said he would take the issues into the National Coronavirus Command Council. This is what the minister's spokesperson Ayanda Ali Payne had to say.
Yesterday, Minister Mbalula met with Taco and had quite a lengthy discussion about a number of issues. They spoke about some of the regulations. They spoke about the financial assistance that the government would be giving to the taxi industry. We're happy to say that talks went well. Minister Mbalula pledged to take the concerns to the National Coronavirus Command Council, as well as the various NECs and the Treasury to see whether or not there could be some amendments. I'm also pleased to say that Minister also met with NTA and similar discussions also commenced. We're quite happy, in fact, that the taxi industry has engaged so positively with the minister and that it had these discussions in interest. And so we are awaiting the 16th of June, that's next week Tuesday, where Minister Mbalula will feed back to the NTA and also feedback to Santaco about what Treasury has been able to do in terms of the financial assistance and what regulations are able to be amended in terms of carrying capacity, in terms of long-distance travel and the like. There was also consensus reached with regards to that. The taxi industry is also viewed as all other sectors. They have annual increases and the industry is no exclusion. The only question was how much should the increases be? Are the increases in line with inflation? Are they in line perhaps with the fuel allowances and decreases? And if not, then that is where there needs to be some penalties or there needs to be some consequences or repercussions. And so the taxi industry was obviously that they would be fair increases in 2020, as is the case in all other years, 2019, 2018, 17, and time immemorial. So there will be some taxi increases in terms of fares this year, but they will not be as exorbitant as initially indicated. They have not given a figure as yet, and I don't want to speak on their behalf, but we have received a promise from them that the increases will be just and justifiable.
Santaco Western Cape chairperson Nazim Abdurrahman said they were waiting for the Mbalula's follow-up meeting on the 16th of June. He added that taxi fare increases were set to come into effect from the 1st of July, as this was part of the normal annual tariff increases.
With the minister yesterday, and there was 4 subjects discussed, 4 items. One was the relief fund, the long outstanding relief fund for the past 3 months, and also the long distance operators that needs to be people needs to be transported from Western Cape to Eastern Cape and from Eastern Cape to Western Cape. And then the other item was the loading capacity from 70 to 100, and also the taxi fare increase. Look, the minibus taxi industry never had a price increase for the past 2 to 3 years. And it's due now that normally on the 1st of July, people increase their fares to adapt to the inflation. There is going to be a proposal from the minister. He said that he will take it to the National Command Council, and he will communicate to us on Tuesday. There will be a follow-up meeting on Tuesday where he will report to our national office, and obviously National will now communicate the outcome of the meeting to us. Look, we are not happy with the first meeting we had because the relief fund did not make sense to us. The money that was offered to the minibus taxi industry as a relief does not help us, and that is why we said we would need a follow-up meeting to discuss this in depth. The minibus taxi industry was always subsidizing the commuters from their own pockets. We do not increase our fares every day and every month as the petrol price is going up and down. So, look, we will obviously do this conservatively by not hurting our commuters, and that is not our intention. It's mainly just to cover our running costs to operate a taxi. It should be by the 1st of July. A lot of the operators said from the 1st of July they will be looking at a percentage to increase, and also to adopt for the steep prices of spares and also fuel. Look, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the minibus taxi industry for reaching out, rendering a service in this very difficult period of COVID-19 to our communities, and the drivers also risk their lives, and also the owners providing the transport for the essential workers. And I think just from government side to come to the party to look at how can the industry be relieved, because they've given relief to all other sectors, but except for the minibus taxi industry.
The Western Cape High Court has postponed an urgent application asking that the coronavirus lockdown regulation banning hair and other personal care salons from reopening be struck down. Cochrane Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma failed to file opposing papers. Now it will be heard by a full bench on the 22nd of June. The Democratic Alliance approached the court this week to have the ban set aside, arguing that it was irrational and unconstitutional. Spokesperson on Trade and Industry, Dean McPherson, said it was an important case for the hundreds of thousands of South Africans who have had their livelihoods shattered by government's inaction in settling the regulations that would allow hairdressers, beauticians and tattoo artists to operate in a safe environment for themselves and their customers. Teachers employed by school governing bodies face losing their jobs because many parents cannot afford to pay school fees during the lockdown. Grade 7 and 12 students returned to school on the 8th of June, while the rest are set to return in July. We spoke to Nihau Provincial Secretary Eric Waleta, asking him if parents were required to pay school fees for the 2 months that students were not at school. We also wanted to know what measures are in place for teachers who are not being paid due to parents not paying school fees and HR issues.
Know that those that are subsidized by Department of Basic Education, everyone who's a staff member is being paid. As far as governing bodies are concerned, they can qualify for the application of the UIF to pay the governing body teachers. But as for parents, we also feel that it cannot be fair for them to pay for 2 months of school while the children were not attending. No teacher's salary has been affected during this particular phase. It might be a challenge as regards to those that are governing body appointments, which what is available at their disposal is to make a submission in relation to the UIF and access the social relief fund to pay those teachers, because one of the things that was made sure that no one salary or income should be affected. That is why this social relief fund put in place. Yes, it's part of what they can access for payment of those school governing body teachers. Yeah, look, Section 39 of the National Schools Act, in fact, make a provision. One, they speak of no-fee schools where a determination is made through the application of the school to qualify as a no-fee school, where the department then, through Provincial Department of Education, will subsidize the learners of that particular school. Second, the parents themselves can apply for an exemption to pay school fees through the governing body, where they will be afforded an opportunity to prove to the school governing body that their means do not qualify them to pay school fees. And the option they have, should that request be refused by the governing body, is that they can always apply to the office of the HOD. But the principle of the Schools Act is no kid or learner should be deprived the opportunity of going to school because they cannot pay or afford.
The Constitutional Court has ruled that the Electoral Act must be reviewed over the next 24 months to ensure that independent candidates could stand for election. The ruling followed an appeal application by the New Nation movement and others to set aside a Western Cape High Court decision that dismissed their argument that the Electoral Act was flawed by not allowing individuals to contest national and provincial elections. The ruling by the Parliament Court has set shock waves throughout the country and has South Africa content with it means for democracy. Justice Mbuseli Matlanga stressed that the Electoral Act must strive for a reading that did not limit the full effect of any rights afforded by Section 19. Helga Jansen-Daubers spoke to Professor Pierre de Vos on what that actually means.
The 11th of June will go down as a monumentous day in our electoral landscape. Justice Madlanga ruled that the Electoral Act of 1998 was unconstitutional. What does this mean?
Well, it means that before yesterday or the day before, what happened was if you wanted to vote for your MP in Parliament or for the provincial Parliament, you had to vote for the party. You could never vote for a person, at least on the national and provincial sphere, and then the party decides who of them go to Parliament. This now says you have to have a system where at least some of the members of Parliament must be directly elected so that you can choose the person, not the party. But we still have to see how that will work because Parliament must now create that system that will allow for it.
So the ruling gives Parliament 24 months. But Prof, this is not a new conversation. Electoral reform as far back as 2003 through the Van Zyl Commission had started this process. Why did it take this long?
Well, at the time, people started saying, you know, the system is not very good where you only vote for the party because then the party is not really responsible to you. It's better for a person. But the report that Van Zyl Club had made was not accepted by the government. They didn't accept it because that report would give more individual MPs more power and the leadership of the party less power. So they said, let's continue with the system that we started with in 1994. So the court had to step in and they said there's actually a right to stand for election and a right to do so without having to join a party. And that's why they made the ruling.
But Prof, this was not smooth sailing to this point because Justice Froneman had a differing view that said that the Constitution is not illegal, if you like. Can you just explain to us what his view was?
Yeah, he said that if you read the Constitution, there are many various provisions. It's very complicated, but he basically said the people who drafted the Constitution actually wrote in the Constitution that we should have this system where you only vote for the party, not the party. And he said, although there's a right to vote, to stand in elections, that is qualified by these other provisions that really say that you have to do so through a party. The majority said, no, we don't need a party. You can stand on your own. So basically, like can happen at local government, where you can vote for a ward councillor. So that's probably the system that we're going to get.
Prof, what do you think this is going to mean for party politics? Because I mean, I was following on Twitter and people were saying, oh, we're getting an American style because now it's, you know, big style reality show kind of elections, etc. But what will this mean for party politics?
Well, what will happen is that we don't know exactly what the system will be, but there will now be, maybe say half the members of parliament will be elected from a constituency. So you will see when it's election, there will be posters with somebody's face that says, I'm your MP, please vote for me. It will be that kind of thing. The problem is, of course, that the parties are still going to be very powerful. And so it's going to be very difficult for somebody who's not one of the members of one of the big parties and not a candidate for them to get elected, because you will have to get, say, 40,000 votes. So nobody has 40,000 friends, so you will have to calculate, you have to make, it will be difficult. But it will bring personality into the system.
Last question, and on a serious note, as the next 2 years are going to have lots of things unfold, but this is a maturation of our democracy.
Well, I think what this means is that the Constitutional Court is very confident, because this is quite a radical decision they made, and that it's everybody accepting it. So it's one of the ways in which the system works, despite many of the other problems. The institutions like the courts, they do their job, they look at the Constitution, they enforce it, then Parliament goes, the court doesn't tell Parliament exactly what to do. Parliament is the politicians, they were elected, then they go off and they fix the problem. Hopefully, in the 2 years, Parliament will use the time well and fix the problem in a way that will really fix the problem.
And I suppose, in the words of our president, it is now in our hands.
Well, it's in our hands, and especially in the hands of the politicians in Parliament, but we can put pressure on them to make the system work for us better, so that we really have accountability from the people we elect.
Prof. Pierre de Vos, thank you very much for your time. Keep warm, keep safe till next time. Thank you.
We spoke to different political leaders and parties about this decision, starting with One Movement, SS founder Mmusi Maimane.
I'm with Mr. Mmusi Maimane, leader of the One People's Movement. Thank you so much. Indeed, an unprecedented week with our COVID-19 infection rate breaching 50,000, and now the Constitutional Court ruling. Mr. Maimane, you've been quoted as saying that this electoral reform will fix a broken system. What do you mean by that?
Firstly, as South Africans, we have observed what has taken place in the recent while. We've seen the fact that parties have become self-serving, that politics has become a tool upon which people can amass wealth instead of service to the people. So it first starts with party capture, then party capture moves to state capture. And once you've got those levers of control, it doesn't matter what the citizens think. It doesn't matter whether the citizens think someone is a criminal or not. They are already taken out of the equation. Because when we go vote, we vote for a party who give us people. What this judgment says is that we will give you a people. We will give you the right people. We will make sure that people in communities elect the people who best will serve them. And if those people don't work, the community can remove those people. So it gives an opportunity, not only for us to deal with state capture, but to really give effect to what democracy is. Democracy is always by the people and for the people.
And yet, Mr. Maimane, if I may, just to interject there, the One People's Movement on Twitter, you've challenged the EFF, these quick growth parties with its 1.8 million members. You've challenged them to say that this reform is going to be different for them. What do you mean? What was the challenge about?
No, the challenge ultimately is it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that we've got many people who vote for the many parties that exist in South Africa, but they don't make a change. You understand? If the ANC wants to remain in power forever, or any party for that matter, be the DA or whatever, all they need to do is just make sure there are always all of these new parties. So long as you have a divided force on that side, democracy struggles. And what I'm calling for is to say, let's get back to reforming even how parties work. Because previously parties just simply got people onto their lists. We don't even know where these people come from. And they represent the people. Now what we can say truly, let's get back to the people. Let's make sure the people can elect their own representations.
Mr. Maimane, you've been a member of the opposition and leading the opposition in Parliament. Do you think that this reformist ruling is going to change the way in which Parliament engages with the elected?
Completely. Because now Parliament relied on majoritarianism. And the most powerful example of that was in the Jacob Zuma matter, when the Parliament could adopt a report that was A, unconstitutional, the court found that, B, was voted by the majority because the ANC didn't care that the people thought Mr. Zuma had stolen money. All it cared about was the fact that in Parliament it could use its numbers to protect Mr. Zuma. Now suddenly, you can't arrive in Parliament as a member of Parliament and simply say, I'm here to vote for just a party. If the constituency you come from says, no, we are saying to you that Mr. So-and-so is corrupt, you must go vote like that. Now suddenly, you can't just stick to party lines. You can bring about the change that eventually says to you, I will vote for the people. Parliament will change.
I have to ask, of course, One People's Movement, is it moving towards a party status?
This is the power of the judgment. I said when I started, we need a movement, not a party. And that was precisely because of this judgment. Because when you build a movement, you realize that we're not pursuing an ideology. We are not pursuing a situation upon which we can say we are just united and we're a party. So if you're part of our party, you can represent the people. We are saying, let's build a movement.
Mr. Maimane, I have to ask, your relationship with the Democratic Alliance has been, there's been lots of talk about it. Do you think that this ruling will affect, and you know better than us, the relationship the DA has with its institutional donor base? You know, that the DA is financially a very wealthy party, and that money dictates from the outside a lot of the positions. Do you think this is going to change the way in which the DA operates?
It should change how every party works, because the ANC is just 3 times the days that capture, it's in connected individuals who eventually capture the party. Eventually, now suddenly, you can't capture the masses. You can't say Musi Maimane must be captured and he must be told what to do, because my oath then becomes truly to the constitution and the people who elect me, not Absolutely. Who pays the money. So everything must change.
Last question and last point, in fact, on a positive note, this ruling, would you say, is indicative of the maturation of our democracy?
It is. And for me, it validates the fight we fought. You know, when we said we wanted to start a One South Africa movement, we said we wanted a movement for the people and by the people. And this celebrates that. Suddenly, people who say, I don't agree with that party, I don't agree with this party, can stand and represent the people. Now suddenly, if you, Helga, say you want to stand for Parliament, now you can. Because there's an opportunity where if the people in your community say, we think she's the best person to represent us, they can vote for you. And you don't have to be in a party. That's the power of this judgment. And ultimately, yes, it will change funding, it will change opportunities, but it will make sure one day that we will never sit with state capture. You see, even now, we've had 10 years of state capture, but no one has gone to jail. Now we can say, let's remove political power out of you so that no one can protect you, so that when the police arrive at your door, you can go to jail.
On that note, Mr. Musimaimani, I wish the One People's Movement all the best in the context of this ruling. And to members and to supporters, keep safe and keep warm. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And keep warm in Cape Town.
UDM and COPE welcomed the judgment.
Well, we welcome the advice and the guidance from the Constitutional Court. The United Democratic Movement has long advocated that the major deficiency in our electoral act or system is a lack of accountability to the electorate. This ruling means that the members of parliament must go and come up with another piece of legislation. My wish is that whilst we are going to more or less do or replicate what we see at local government level, where you have proportional representation, PR councillors as well as those who are representing wards, we should be also adding that the people of South Africa is time, like in other countries, that they should direct their own president. So this process, therefore, this judgment, we welcome it. Thank you.
We are, as the Congress of the People, that we welcome, firstly, this ruling of the Constitutional Court. But we must also say that this is a victory for democracy in this country. We, as the Congress of the People, have campaigned over the years in Parliament and outside of Parliament to have an amendment on the Electoral Act. And we are very much happy that it happened yesterday in the Constitutional Court. That will bring new style of working. A public representative will be accountable to the voters now, because the just independent candidates or public representatives will have constituencies, not like what is happening now on a party list. We are very excited about this big victory for democracy.
That's all from the news front, but when we come back, Stephanie Pitt will give us an update on what's trending on social media. Welcome back. You're still watching the Our City COVID-19 show. I am Stephanie Pitt. Let's take a look at the popular hashtags on Twitter today. Hashtag day 78 of lockdown. There is a distinct trend attached to the days of the lockdown countdown on Twitter, and that's for businesses and people to attach whatever they're selling. Lots of hot and tasty meals on this bitterly cold Friday. Hashtag cold front. The snow and storms that hit Cape Town earlier this week have resulted in very cold weather up country, and they are talking about it non-stop. Meanwhile, people are urged not to travel to see the snow around the Western Cape, as it is still a lockdown. We'd like to know your views on burning issues during this pandemic, so we'll be posting questions on our Facebook page daily, Our City CT. You can also follow us on Twitter at Our City CT. That's it from me, Stephanie Pitt. Please stay with us after the break. Michaela Miller will be giving you information on resources and places of safety you can use during this period. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Our City, the COVID show on Cape Town TV, channel 263. Here's a recap of today's headlines. Gender-based violence highlighted again after the brutal killings of Naledi Pangindawo and Segofatsu Pule. We'll be looking at another case in the Western Cape. Western Cape Sintako waiting for news on relief funds, while the Department of Transport is tabling the grievances of taxi associations with the National Coronavirus Command Council, and the Concord declares the Electoral Act unconstitutional. Professor Pierre de Vos explained what this means, and political leaders reacted to the ruling. If you are in need of any assistance, here are some organizations helping communities stay safe during this period. That's it from the Our City COVID-19 news show, but we will continue giving you the latest news updates on what's happening in Cape Town on our Facebook page at Our City CT and on Twitter at Our City CT. You can also get in touch with us via email on ourcity@capetowntv.org or call us on 021 448 0448. We would like to pay tribute to all the technicians and pathologists in the National Health Laboratory Services and private laboratories, as well as the staff who work in the most risky environment 24 hours a day to churn out these results. From me, Michaela Miller, and the Our City News crew, goodbye.